Midway through, not even midway through, still training camp going on in Oxnard, California. Of course, 105 through the fan. We got you still covered. Brian Broaddus out there. And look, Broaddus did the morning show. Obviously, he did G-Bag Nation. I was like, look, we can get Broaddus on again, and he will give us his time, or we could talk to a dude who's always available, always got a great angle on practice, and always just gives us great information. He works at The Athletic covering these Cowboys. His name is Jon Machota, and he joins us right now on the D&M Leasing Hotline. Johnny, what's happening, my man?
Not much. Living the dream out here. Pretty good weather.
Yeah, I that's one of the things that we always hear when you guys head out to Oxnard is that it sounds like you're living pretty good. Now, our guys, when they were out there, right, and you saw these jokers plenty, sounds like they got sunburnt a whole bunch. Have you had to deal with such things, or are you a professional unlike these jokers?
Not sunburn, but it is funny how you're just wearing shorts and shoes outside, and whether you're covering practice or you're in by like these tennis courts where the press conferences are, you don't even realize it, but like your leg it looks like I have like, trying to think how to describe it. Both of my legs from like my knee down to my ankle look like I have like an Iverson sleeve on it right now. Where it's like my foot is completely pale, and then above my knee is completely pale, but my leg looks like I'm wearing like a sleeve on it.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's part of training camp. But, I'm not complaining because the weather is just about the same every single day. So,
excellent. I need that to be the last time you say it, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a revolt amongst the listeners of this program that are very jealous of you, as I am as well. Another thing that's part and parcel of training camp is fights. Apparently in Seattle, they had apparently 5 or 6 fights break out today, including DK Metcalf swinging around a helmet, which led us to ask, who is the player that you would least want to fight? And now I turn that question to you, Johnny Matches. At least we can keep this to the Cowboys. Who's the player on this roster that you least want to fight?
Oh, man. Micah Parsons would probably be, if he's not number one, he's certainly in the top 2 or 3. Just how, when he's not in, like if he's not actually doing a drill or out on the field during, team activities, he's usually kind of shadow boxing somebody. And I know he does a lot of off-season boxing training, and he's just a freak athlete. And he obviously can get angry. So he would be very high up on the list for sure. I don't think I can think of anybody else. DeMarcus Lawrence is up there. So pretty much the entire defensive line.
Okay.
Mr. Match has got a question here for you. I haven't talked to you in a while. I have a keen for the wide receiver room, and in this hypothetical, let's say the Cowboys are going to keep 6 receivers on their 53. CeeDee Lamb, Cooks, Tolbert, and Turpin. I think we can both assume are in that 4 pretty comfortably. Fill out those last 2 spots for me.
So, yeah, I think that those are pretty set. I think Jalen Brooks would be on there too. You didn't say him, did you?
No. Didn't say Brooks.
Yeah, Brooks would be on there. The guys that have stood out in camp that maybe you wouldn't expect, especially recently, has been Jalen Cropper, and then I'd say maybe the previous 4 or 5 practices, Tyron Billy Johnson. And I went into camp thinking that Ryan Flournoy would be locked in just because they used a 6th-round pick on him. But from what we've seen so far, and he's been, coming back from injury and stuff like that, we haven't seen much from Flournoy. So I do think I can see them giving him the benefit of the doubt, again, using a 6th-round pick on him to keep Flournoy. But in terms of what we've seen, Brooks is locked in. He's not going anywhere. But that last spot, Tyron Billy Johnson's making a serious push for it because he's been really good. And then, like I said, Cropper's been coming on late. So those are 2 guys I'm really looking forward to seeing. And when they practice tomorrow against the Rams, and then when they get into these preseason games, because there's not going to be a reason to have to see Brandon Cooks and some of these other guys. So, but yeah, Cropper and Billy Johnson, those are 2 guys that, anything that you see being tweeted about them having like good camps or things like that lately, there's a lot of truth to that.
So I guess it's safe to assume they won't carry 7. So you think between Cropper, Billy Johnson, and Flournoy, there's one roster spot between those 3?
Yeah, I do. Because the thing is, I just can't find another spot on the roster where you can go that. I think of that and I'm already going with, I just put out a 53 with like only 9 defensive linemen, which that would be really tough to do. because I just think that there's a decent possibility like your 10th defensive lineman might not even be on the team right now, either from when other teams cut to 53 or maybe they make a move for one with Sam Williams now out. And so it's tough because there's not really any position where I just feel like, oh yeah, this one's kind of, there's a lot of guys here. You can just take a couple of these guys off. No, that 53 is tight. Like injuries might happen in the preseason that kind of sort that thing out, and that does happen from time to time. But as we sit here right now, it's just tough for me to trim down somewhere else so I can keep a seventh receiver.
We're talking to Jon Machota of The Athletic right here on 105.3 The Fan. And, John, you mentioned the defensive line, how, kind of made the way it's a little light. And obviously with Zimmer, the new defensive coordinator on this team, defensive line, that interior matters so much. What has been your impression? What have you kind of seen from the interior at the start of camp here? Because it feels like it's going to be super important to what happens with this defense.
I mean, not a lot has stood out, and a lot of that is because – frankly, that's why you want to see these practices against other teams. That's why you want to see the preseason games, because a lot of the stuff in the run game, whether it be the offensive line or the interior of the defensive line, there's only so much you can show in these practices. And I say that knowing that some teams do tackle more to the ground than others, and that's just not really how the Cowboys operate training camp. And it really wasn't under Jason Garrett either. And Mike McCarthy certainly does have, he's trying to get through this thing healthy. He wants guys, obviously to know their role, to, be in the right position, sound technique, all of that. But he also doesn't want these guys getting, freak injuries because somebody rolled up on the back of somebody else's leg and stuff. So I don't think we'll know for sure until we see some more preseason games. But I just look at the roster and I'm just surprised that they didn't do more defensive tackle in the offseason. And so, I'll hold out my judgment on the offseason. Maybe that their plan all along was, hey, we're going to throw a lot of young guys at the defensive tackle spot. If nobody else really emerges, that's when our hand will be forced. We'll have to make a move like they did, a couple of years ago with Jonathan Hankins, where I'm not saying that they're going to trade like a first, second, or third round pick, but maybe they trade like a fourth or fifth round pick for a guy on another team. Because I just look at the defensive tackles on paper, and I don't know how that group improves the running game, where let's not act like the running defense has been an issue just 1 year. It's been an issue for several years. And so, not re-signing Hankins, Mozzie's been, okay, but it's not like looks like an elite top first round pick where you're like, oh yeah, no, you're just going to put him next to Osa and they're just going to, tear things up. I don't think you're seeing that yet. So there's a lot of question marks at defensive tackle for sure.
Excuse me for this question being kind of broad, but I am interested to hear your perspective on this. Out of all the rookies that were drafted this year by the Cowboys, which of those guys are standing out as day one ready, guys that could be getting some first team reps, and then kind of any surprises within that?
Nealon's been really good. Marshawn Nealon, the second round pick, and he's looked the part, I will say, as I thought more of a Sam Williams backup. But he's going to get thrown to the wolves now with Sam Williams out. And so I could see him with the way that they're doing stuff with Micah Parsons playing more at linebacker. I don't see Nealon as like your traditional defensive end starter where, he's going to play as much as like maybe, let's say, Lawrence will. But I think he's going to get a lot of snaps, probably the 70% or so more that Mike Zimmer said that Sam Williams was going to get. And so I think he's a good bet there. Guyton is probably too. They've worked Chumadoga a lot at left tackle. But I still think that Tyler Guyton ultimately gets that position. With Cooper Beebe, I think they're going to go the veteran route at center to start the season. And so maybe Beebe overtakes it later in the season. But if I was to pick right now, like week one, they're playing Cleveland. I think the starting center is Brock Hoffman. And so after that, Kalen Carson's been really nice, but he's not going to start. And then you got Maris Leafau is done some nice things, but he's not going to start either. So that's probably where it probably cuts off. But yeah, Kalen Carson, I will say, he's probably been, for me, the biggest surprise at camp, just because I thought he would be solid, but I feel like he's exceeded expectations up to this point.
Which is great because you definitely need cornerback depth on this roster. But, John, you mentioned Maris Leafau, and you said that he's probably not going to be a starter. But on the unofficial, heavy on the unofficial depth chart that the Cowboys released, they put 3 linebackers on there, which we know is not going to be frequent. But he's one of the 3 that you have as starters, along with Eric Kendricks and Damone Clark. over Demarion Overshown. What am I to make of that, especially with the assertion that you've made that he's probably not necessarily going to start? Do you think that it has impacts on playing time and such?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the depth chart like that, just because there's a lot of stuff that they updated every week during the season, and there'll be some things that'll change, and then you'll go and ask a coach about it, and they don't put as much stock into it as I think a lot of other people do when they see it. And so I'll put it to you this way. They're going to play we're going to be in a fantasy world where there's no such thing as injuries. Okay. If that's the case, I think that the snaps that Eric Kendricks and DeMarvion Overshown will get will be, if you're doing a chart, they'll be significantly more than all the other linebackers, but it's a dangerous position. I mean, it's not just the Cowboys who've had injury issues there. It's all across the league, and you've had a bunch of elite linebackers that have retired early. It's a dangerous position. And so because of that, you have to factor in the injuries. And because of that, yeah, I could see Leofau making an impact, but I just think that there's big things for Overshown and Kendricks as long as they stay healthy.
I have to ask you this. We were talking about guys making a jump, kind of making that big step. A name that we didn't bring up that's probably the hottest topic of the season right now, or at least of the offseason, is a guy like Trey Lance. Obviously, there's been some reports that it hasn't looked as smooth as maybe you'd want it to be. Would you agree with those reports, or has there been some things you've seen on the side that give you confidence in this guy moving forward?
I would say he's been up and down. There's definitely some moments where, you can tell that he's in a new offense and he looks like a young quarterback. But then there's other moments where you're like, oh yeah, I can see that. Those are, whether it's his athletic ability or some throws that he'll make that you're like, oh yeah, I can see why, teams saw this in probably pre-draft workouts and were like, yeah, this guy's going to be a high first-round pick. But it's just been inconsistent. And, a lot of people have commented under videos I've posted from practice about how his eyes will lock in pretty early once he gets a snap on his intended receiver. And obviously you're going to have a hard time doing that all the time on Sundays and having success. But there'll be throws here or there where you're like, yeah, I mean, that looks like a high-level, NFL quarterback throw. But there's far too much inconsistency right now to, like I did a 53 and I have him on it just because of the fact that they used a fourth-round pick to get him. And so they're going to give him every benefit, of the doubt to try and make this roster. But, yeah, he's clearly the number one player that I'll be watching in these preseason games, and I'm sure most Cowboys fans will, because that's where you'll really get to decide on him. The thing I always go back to is just Dak's rookie year and being at all those camp practices in 2016. And it's not like Dak just, blew away Jamil Showers for that number 3 job behind Romo and Kellen Moore. I mean, it was pretty close a lot of days. And then Kellen Moore goes down, and then Dak gets in there at the Coliseum against the Rams, and he looks great. And then Romo goes down in that preseason game in Seattle, and you're just like, man, he doesn't blink, and he just takes over that offense and just goes right down the field. And you're just like, man, some people are just gamers. And so that's why, yeah, the practices, there's definitely been some things that you're like, wow, he looks like he's quite a bit behind Cooper and Dak. But if he plays well in the preseason, no one's going to care what he did, in any of these, training camp practices. So, yeah, he's definitely number one player to watch. Well, I guess you make the argument for Ozzie Smith too, but on offense, it's Trey Lance.
Well, that leads me to what was going to be my last question of this was, I mean, you're coming up on Rams practice here shortly. I mean, where are your eyes going to be trained most with these Cowboys as they get to practice against another set of football players?
Okay, yeah. No, Ozzie Smith is certainly a guy that they need him to play well. They need him to have, he can't just be an okay defensive tackle. They need him to, be a starting defensive tackle. And so, yeah, eyes will be on him for sure. Kalen Carson, no question, just because of what we've seen from him up to this point. Going against some of those Rams receivers and going against Matthew Stafford, I'm interested to see that there. But even guys like the starters like Dak and Brandon Cooks and people like that, I just don't think are going to play a lot, if at all, in the preseason. Like, I don't expect Dak to play at all in the preseason. So this is going to be kind of like his preseason work, I feel like. And so even a lot of those starters, I'm going to be interested in, like, is Micah Parsons just going out there and how much are they showing that looks different from last year? Or are they going to be kind of vanilla with it? And then I would say even the new kickoff stuff, I'm going to be interested to see how much are they going to show in that practice as well. But let's be honest, the number one thing I'm looking for is I just want to see if there's going to be any fights.
That's right.
Hey, they're sending out fines now I saw after the Lions and Giants one, and so maybe that'll happen. But when you get two teams together like that, the Vegas odds are pretty high that there's going to be some type of scuffle. And for my job, I'm not with the team. I want to see that. That's entertaining for me. The coaches don't want it. They don't want guys breaking their hands, throwing punches at helmets. But anytime there's two teams practicing, that's always in the back of your mind. Like at any given play, someone accidentally hits Stafford, somebody accidentally hits Dak, and then all of a sudden here you go. You got 20 guys going at it in the middle of the field. And so that'll be interesting to watch as well. But really for me, it is there's really no shortage of things because you can go almost down the list of every position group, and there's going to be stuff that's going to be interesting to watch. So the way that they've made the offseason has made it this way because there's just stuff that happens in OTAs and minicamp that it just isn't that exciting because it's not real football. So when you get a chance to get pads on and go against another team, it's your first chance really to see real football since that playoff loss against Green Bay.
Wait, best they scrapping moment since you've been covering the NFL is?
You mean that have happened in the past?
Yeah, I imagine, yeah. Whatever one that you can recall, like the moment where you're like, oh, man, they're fighting right now.
It would probably be a Rams practice. I don't remember what year it was, but it happened in one of the far fields, and it just stands out to me because I was there, and at the far end of the field, Dez was talking to Jerry Jones, and Dez had his helmet off. And just to watch, like, standing right by Dez, the way he put on his helmet and just bolted in there and just start getting right in the middle of it. And you're just like, wow, man, like, it's impressive because, that's your teammate out there and you want to stick up for your guys and stuff like that. But it is that one was really – because it spilled over into by, like, the fans over against the fences and things like that. And so you just always wonder, do teams kind of have it in the back of their mind or certain players like, oh, I'm going out there today and I'm starting to fight, guys. So I'm giving you a heads up on it. Maybe these fines will stop that, but I think that there's a decent chance we see at least a little scuffle tomorrow.
Excellent. Always appreciate your insight and your candor. His name is Jon Machota. He covers the Cowboys for The Athletic, and we always appreciate when you get an opportunity to talk to him here on The Get Right. Thank you, my man.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Have a good night.